Hello, everyone, and thank you for that wonderful introduction and this lovely stage. First of all, I work for Bitdefender, as some of you know. Amongst other things, I manage the bug bounty program. The bug bounty programs, because we have two. One is on our website, and the other one is on Bugcrowd. So, shameless plug. If you want to test any kind of security aspects of our infrastructure, we will not press charges. We will not call the police. You are invited to do so in any fashion, as long as you do responsible disclosure. So with that in mind, let's talk about privacy. And hopefully this works. No? Oh well. There we go. Privacy. I was thinking about jokes and analogies on privacy, and it's something like teenager sex. It's one of the things that I came up with, you know? Everybody believes that they can do it, everybody believes that they know how to do it, but essentially only a very few have an actual clue about what's going on in that field. So, first off, let's start with a quick question. There we go. How many of you, and please work with me here, how many of you have stickers on cameras? Nice. Can we have a microphone, please? So, again, please, hands and stuff.
Pick one.
You, sir. You, sir. Why?
Well, just in case, I don't trust the software that much. It's hard to really know when the camera is on and off, so I don't feel like I'm in control unless I put the sticker. The other way would be probably to buy a Libre laptop, which has like a hardware switch to turn off the camera.
Cool. But you don't use it so NSA does situations, right? Not for that.
I think if NSA targets someone, it won't help anyway.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about, I'm just going to put this here. Today we're going to talk about leaks. We're going to talk about scandals. We're going to talk about surveillance programs. So let's start with how this doesn't work again. There we go. Let's start with the FBI. You know this one? So another interesting aspect is I'm thinking about how religious people consider surveillance from God, right? Because if I move too far away, it doesn't work. So I'm just going to stay here. So I wonder how religious people consider, you know, if people complain about NSA surveillance, I wonder if there's paranoid religious people that complain about God surveillance. And actually, I think that's happening. Okay, let's start with the serious stuff. In 2013, Our turn. So in 2013, the whole privacy thing started with the Snowden revelation. Now, strangely enough, there were talks about privacy. Encryption was already a thing since 2001. And the Snowden revelations were the thing that brought privacy into the spotlight, right? I mean, right now, I ask anybody to argue with me on that one. And an interesting fact was that with that, it gave birth to a new trend in both hypes, media, and warriors. Let's call them not necessarily social justice warriors, but privacy warriors. People more or less monetizing the Snowden revelations. And I'm doing it again. So we have Mikko Hipponen doing a TED Talk on the fact that Orwell was an optimist. Now, I'm not trying to say that, again, just to be clear, this talk is not about the fact that surveillance is good. Just just to make that perfectly clear. This talk is about mostly what surveillance is, what privacy is, and what type of data should we consider as already compromised, and what type of data should we actually not necessarily give up on, but not fight that much against sharing. So these are just some research that I've done quickly on surveillance programs. We have PRISM in collaboration with Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, and Google. It's available data on that reliable source called the internet. We have Xkeyscore, and we have Tempora, and so on and so forth. Now, besides these surveillance programs that we know about, we have leaks, such as Panama Papers and many, many others. Now, this is where I ask myself, what are the pros and cons with regards to leaks? So, another show of hands. Are the leaks a good thing? Come on, you are in privacy, you're in security. Admit it. You believe that the leaks are a good thing. Because people know what happens. And people should be informed of what happens. And even though some people knew that the surveillance programs already happen, most people don't. And it was about informing the public audience. It was about informing the masses that surveillance programs exist. And they should be aware of that. It was about informing the masses that the Panama Papers exist, and that this type of data and this type of transactions, if you will, happen. The question is, are the whistleblowers heroes or traitors? Did they break the law? So, okay, show of hands. Who believes that who believes that Snowden broke the law? Okay. Who believes that the law was unfair? Okay. Who believes that the guy who hacked Panama Papers broke the law? Panama Papers broke the law. Who believes that that law was unfair? Okay. Another one. Who believes that the guy who hacked Adult Friend Finder or Ashley Madison broke the law? Now, who believes that that law was unfair? Because in essence, the guy who hacked Ashley Madison committed an illegal thing. He didn't do responsible disclosure, right? Is there any difference between the three? Obviously, the Snowden part is special. But between Panama Papers and the Ashley Madison part, the only difference is the end game, right? The final purpose of the leak. Because in the Panama Papers case, the guy believed that he did a social service, and he did. We discovered that even our beloved leaders had some stuff in there. But he did break the law by hacking into somebody's servers. And this is just the tip of a very, very, very dark iceberg. We're gonna try to dip a little deeper and understand what kind of data and how can be stolen from our devices. So let's go a little bit into the Cambridge Analytica scandal. How many of you know about it or what happened? Just to know. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, Cambridge Analytica did surveys. And they did those surveys on Facebook and using different types of apps, thousands of apps. And when you would fill your profile into those surveys, that data would be fed into Cambridge Analytica, who would process it and profile people. Not only people, so not only you who filled those profiles, but also your friends. So in essence, millions and millions and millions of people gave their private information and their profiles and their browsing habits voluntarily to Cambridge Analytica. And incidentally, to my previous slide, to this one, sorry. One guy told me yesterday that if I'm present in those leaks, I consider the whistleblower a traitor. If I'm not present in those leaks, I consider the whistleblower a hero. So it's kind of a small hypocritical situation here, but I think it's worth mentioning. If you're affected and it affects you directly, so if you are a businessman in Panama Paper, maybe a legitimate one, you will consider the one that leaked that data as a traitor. Now, in Cambridge Analytica, it's one of the biggest and higher profile situations where you realize what happens if an institution that processes data gets hacked. It wasn't passwords, it wasn't credit card information, it wasn't social security numbers, it was user behavior, it was your behavior. It was information that could be used into manipulating you. And apparently it was used. So apparently the data from the Cambridge Analytica leaks was used into influencing elections, into targeting people towards different kinds of goals, because if I know your habits, if I know what you like, if I know what you need, it's easier for me as Boris, or I don't want, not Boris, okay, sorry, as an entity that wants to influence something to target you and to drive you towards, to steer your mind, your train of thoughts towards something. And this is a very discrete process. Not many realize it, not even security experts realize it. I've been to different conferences, including conferences that are very, very focused on privacy. And people are very, very narrow-minded, including hackers, sorry, no offense, when driven towards one purpose or when driven towards one train of thought. They believe one thing, and it's very difficult to steer them sideways. And if they believe that, then it's very difficult to kind of, how should I put this? To steer them toward the reality, right? So if you manage to drive a person that believes they're smart into believing something, into trying to understand something, the reality doesn't matter anymore. It's only what that particular entity drove that person towards. Anyway, that was with the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Something more interesting that you probably didn't know is a company called Location Smart that gathered location history about users from telcos in the United States. And this is legitimate stuff. This is nothing illegal. This is something that's happening, and it does happen. So long story short, telcos were sharing location information about users with this company. So we move along from legitimate or semi-legitimate. I personally don't believe it's legitimate, but what, to hackers. So how else can data be stolen? Through illegal means. Rogue GSM cells. This is a tweet that I've sent earlier this year from RSA. I had a test phone with me, and my test phone was hijacked by a rogue GSM cell, incidentally running the software developed by some of my friends, Yate BTS. And I've talked to them and asked them, how did that happen? And they said, well, it's kind of simple. You just put up a rogue cell, and that's going to hijack most of the devices around it. Okay, what else can it do? Well, it can downgrade your 4G connection to 2G. Why is that relevant? Because 4G is encrypted, 2G is not encrypted. So GPRS, Edge, 2G is not encrypted. So if you want to do a man-in-the-middle attack and sniff somebody's connections, all you have to do is downgrade the phone from 4G to 2G, and at that point, you will be able to see that person's traffic. And mind you, if you see 2G on anything, including, unfortunately, the POS that we see in stores, those POSs mostly run on 2G. And fun fact, somebody did a demo 2 years ago at CCC about hijacking POS transactions, and they were able to intercept the POS transaction, alter the POS transaction, and eventually impersonate any merchant that they wanted. The process was very simple. All they needed was the password that POS required to authenticate in the bank, a port, TCP port in the bank, and what else? Yeah, a merchant ID. So what they did was they got the password from the documentation of the POS. It was the same password in absolutely all the POSs. they got the merchant ID from a receipt. They went and bought a pack of gum from the merchant, and it's on the receipt. And they brute forced the port on the bank server, 65,000 tries. So they managed to impersonate the merchant and issue a receipt for 50 euros, printing a rechargeable phone thing, SIM card, right? So you know, those come directly on the receipt. You pay, and on the receipt you have the code to recharge your phone. What else? We have botnets that hijack cameras, and right now we've seen them earlier this year stealing feeds, stealing the recordings from DVR cameras. So rather than enrolling them in botnets, we saw in the binary, when we did reverse engineering on the binaries from the botnets, we saw that they implemented capabilities to exfiltrate video recordings from people's homes. And if you're curious, we've done research on about, I think, 24 brands of cameras, and in all of them, we've identified vulnerabilities that enable hackers to access the video feed and see the video feed of people. And unfortunately, just recently, it's another talk that we're going to do soon, in one brand of video camera, you can access all the recordings of all the customers of that camera brand, and it's about 500,000 people. And it's one of those cameras that enable you to store your recordings in their cloud so you can access it later. So yeah. What more? Leaks. So leaks are relevant because very often we post information, we share information, and we trust the provider with our data. And that's kind of a mistake, right? Because when we trust a provider with our data, we have to ask, what is the consequence if that provider loses my data? So, fun fact, Equifax leaked the information of 143 million users. Anthem is an American health insurance company. And a friend of mine had access to that leak. And that friend of mine looked at the columns in that leak. And there were 83 columns for each person. You had first name, last name, credit card information, social security number. That was the plain and simple stuff, and password. And then you had car history, the kind of cars that the guy drove, the amount of time usually spent going to work. So that's stuff that you feel when in most companies, and you tell them, it takes me 15 minutes to get to work, and this is my route. That information was in the Anthem leak. Your health history, obviously, because they're a healthcare insurance company. And again, 83 columns of personal information about that person. And let's not forget Yahoo, with their 3 billion users hacked, and all that information lost. Now, the thing is, the only obligation, and this is very important to understand, the only obligation that a company has in managing your data in case of a breach is to tell you. It's very rarely the case, such as it was, I think, with Facebook that got fined $40 million. It's very rarely the case that the company has to do anything else or improve its security or have any other consequence than informing the users that there was a breach and they should change their passwords. And some of them don't even do that. Fun fact, 2 days ago, I was at Notary Public, and I had to do a deposition. And they had a GDPR, a small GDPR piece of paper that you sign, and it says that I was informed about the GDPR regulations, and I agree that all my data will be shared with third parties. And if I don't agree that my data will be shared with third parties, I will not be able to do the deposition because the notary will not be able to legalize my deposition if they don't share it with third parties. And the notary has the obligation, the legal obligation, to manage my data securely and process my data securely. And I look at the process my data securely and legal obligation, and I'm like, these guys can manage my data securely? These guys that have like sheets of paper with people's public information across desks, and I look at it and see people's social security numbers and ID cards. These guys will process my data securely and ask the lady, so what happens if my data gets compromised while in your care? And she says, sir, don't worry about it. It's just the GDPR thing. You just have to sign. There was a law that was passed two months ago. Okay, but what happens if my data, it says here, my data is processed securely by the notary public. What happens? And she says, this guy wants to fail us, wants to flunk us. And she calls the higher authority in the notary. She calls the notary. The guy comes, and he says, it's the GDPR thing. There was a, yes, I know. But what happens if my data gets compromised while in your care? The guy goes like, very seriously asks, like if our server is hacked? Well, okay, sure, if your server is hacked. So that's impossible. And the guy was sitting down at his big desk, and I'm like, are you serious? And I was like, are you serious? How can you say it's impossible? Look, we're a law firm. There's no way our server can get hacked. I tell the guy, there are bigger companies than this little law firm that you have here, bigger companies with better servers and more money invested in security than the zero that you invest here, and more people in security than the no people that you have here in security that got breached. So you cannot seriously tell me that there's no chance your server gets hacked. So in case it does get hacked, what happens? What are the consequences for you? And the guy literally told me, and prepared, I don't know, man. True story. So let's move on. My point here is that any form of data privacy is a myth. I know this is a cliche. It has been said millions and millions of times by many, many people. I'm saying it again. Any form of privacy is a myth. You have to be you have to pay attention to the kind of data that you actually want to secure, and not necessarily disregard, but treat everything else as compromised. If you want to have proper security on one communication, in particular once a month with somebody, then research all the PGPs and all the encryption layers and triple encryption layers. Actually, at one point, for all those of you that are older and slightly more technical, remember we used to do white talk. Who here knows what white talk is? So we SSH into a server, and white talk was a program that enabled users to talk to each other in a Unix environment. So you do white talk other user, and you talk to each other in the terminal. So we used SSH as our encryption layer, and we all SSH'd into the server so we can talk to each other. Because that was probably more secure than anything else that you would trust. Because whenever you use something else, you trust that software to take care of you. You trust WhatsApp to take care of you. You trust Signal to take care of you. Why not? So, and I'm not talking just about online activities, because people say that whatever you post online stays online and it will be there forever and you cannot delete it. That's true, first of all, but it's not just the online part, it's also your friends. So let's talk about stuff that hijacks your data or can hijack your data. Your keyboards on both computers and phone. There's predictive typing, and there's machine learning activated in virtually all the devices that we use today. That machine learning engine understands what you type, so it can help you type faster in the future. It is enabled in almost everything that we use today, and it records everything that we do. Arguably with a good purpose, but you don't know that. Wi-Fi. Some of you don't know, who here knows about the fact that Wi-Fi broadcasts constantly the access points that you were ever associated with? Cool. So for those of you who don't know, hang on. Okay, That MAC address is looking for menu recovery. That MAC address is looking for DefCamp public Wi-Fi. That MAC address is looking for Orange mobile Wi-Fi. That MAC address is looking for Romania. That MAC address is looking for Synchron, and so on and so forth. So essentially, your Wi-Fi devices, if they have Wi-Fi enabled, and if they have, let me just, yeah, and if they have, if they're not connected to Wi-Fi, they will constantly look up all the access points that they have in their memory. Right? If you connect it to a Wi-Fi at some point, and this is fun for tracking people and saying, you know, you've been to that hotel, and you've been to that hotel, and you've been to that airport, and you've been to that place. And somebody's aggressively looking for menu recovery. So that may be a bug in that device, not my software, of course. Moving on. Voice commands. About 4 years ago, there was a huge scandal on Samsung smart TVs because the press said that Samsung smart TVs send the ambiental audio from your living room to a server located remotely. So essentially, the media said that Samsung smart TVs will listen to your living room and send the voice ambiental audio to third-party server. Another show of hands. Who here believes that that's a bad thing? In my humble opinion, conceptually, it is a bad thing, but everybody does it. Everybody does it. The whole process is, devices constantly listen for ambiental audio for that, hey Siri, hey Cortana, okay Google, Alexa, and whatnot. So that's constantly ambiental audio recording in order to hear that trigger. And then what happens is that what happens next when you say your voice commands and you say, I would like some spaghetti in a weird accent and whatever, then that recording, that audio recording, gets sent to a third-party server for speech-to-text processing. Because your little phone and your little tablet and your little whatever gadget you have doesn't have the power to do speech-to-text. So all your speech-to-text is processed remotely. If you didn't know that, you know it now. Anything that's voice commands, except for that initial trigger, is processed remotely on a third-party server. Sometimes in China, sometimes in Russia, sometimes in Romania, I would hope, at some point. Application permissions. This is a done and done, but just to make sure that everybody knows this, if you give an application access to the camera to scan QR codes, that application will be able to turn on the camera for other purposes. There's no question about that. It will not turn on the camera just because you asked it to. Once you've given it permission to use the camera, it will be able to turn on the camera for anything else. And camera is one thing, of course, microphone is the same thing. If an application that you granted access to the microphone wants to do recordings and send that recording to the internet, you will not even know that it's happening. And, sorry? In the 8th version of Android. And how does that information look like? Is it visible? Like, oh, but you have to look for it, for that, right? So you have to look for that. It's not a notification. Oh, and it does that every time something uses your microphone? Oh, cool. iPhone doesn't do that. And no, I'm not going to switch to Android. The Truecaller bit is one of my personal favorites because it shows that no matter how paranoid you are, your friends may not be as paranoid as you are. For research purposes, I had to create a Facebook account, a fake Facebook account. And the only thing that I put that was real was the phone number. It was a friend's phone number. That person has never been on Facebook. Never. So that phone number has never been on Facebook. And for everything else, all the other details, I used fakenamegenerator.com. If you don't know the website, I strongly recommend that you visit it at least once. It generates a whole identity, including the car that you drive, how much you weigh. All you have to do is just copy-paste the details that website generates for you, right? So first name, last name, social security number, phone number, city of residence, high school that you went to, a whole identity of a person. So it's a very useful site when you want to create fake identities. So all that information I took from fakenamegenerator.com, I was from Iowa, whatever high school, whatever university, and so on and so forth, and my friend's phone number. I registered the account, and then Facebook starts, pumping me with, do you know this guy from the Iowa University? Do you know this guy from the workplace that I've put in? And so on and so forth. After that, it starts showing me, do you know this guy? And it's my face. And I'm like, shit. Or do you know this guy? And it was a mutual friend of me and the guy with the phone number. Again, that phone number has never been on Facebook, ever. So how did Facebook know about it? No, obviously I VPN'd through the US. Because this my friend is a popular person, and he had many friends that had his number in their address book. And when they installed the Facebook app uploaded the contacts to Facebook, and this guy's number was in their contacts. So Facebook saw that this guy was related to those guys, including me. That's when I stopped using the Facebook app, by the way. And made recommendations because he saw that that number was in those people's address books. So even no matter how paranoid you are, everything that you say, everything that you do, everything that you share with your friends will be leaked. I'm not saying may be leaked, I'm saying will be leaked by your friends. If your friends have your number in their address book, your number is online because of Truecaller, SyncMe, and Facebook, and many, many others. And personally, I believe that, and this is another crusade of mine, I believe that passwords in all forms and shapes and sizes should die. I'm a strong supporter of passwordless, an initiative that died, and I'm a great mourner, of passwordless, an initiative that died. If you type passwords, those passwords can be easily breached. Personally, I recommend copy-pasting passwords. I personally use KeePass as a password manager. It's a simple database, fully local, encrypted by 4096 bits. And I copy-paste passwords from KeePass into browser, and I do save session, so I have to enter passwords as fewer times as possible. Because if you have to type passwords, those passwords are compromised. Who here believes that the pattern on Android is a secure thing? Right? You're smart people. Nobody. They're not secure. The fingerprint on iPhones or on whatever other devices, they're not secure. You can hijack the fingerprint with a $40 gear in silicon. The paper was out literally 3 days after the iPhone 5 came to market. And the most common hack and the easiest one is, if you live with somebody, treat everything that you have as shared with that person. Because, for example, an attack that made it to the press at some point was that the wife suspected the husband of cheating on her. And what she did was, when the guy slept, she took his hand and unlocked the phone. And also browser extensions. I personally have another grudge against browser extensions. I know they're popular, and I know people like them, but browser extensions have access to everything that you browse, everything that you see in your browser. And if for whatever reason the provider of that browser extension gets hacked, whoever hacks them will have access to the browsing habits and the browsing content of all the people using that extension. Be very, very mindful of that. And the list goes on. We have a few minutes left. So, A few words on static data. Static data is stuff like your social security number. I see many people whining about, I don't want to share my social security number. You shouldn't, and you should, out of principle, ask what people are doing with it. But static data is compromised, and unfortunately is used in authentication mechanisms. Why? I have no idea. There have been so many social engineering cases where people hacked other people because of their mother's maiden name, their city of residence, their social security number, and so on and so forth. This kind of data is compromised by design. And if you ask me, will GDPR help me? I dare you to raise a hand if you believe that GDPR helps you. You are a brave person, my friend. Well, no, GDPR doesn't help you. Because GDPR, as I was saying with the notary part, doesn't help you in hacks or negligence. Always, sure. I needed it. So, and again, I treat that as compromised. I even treat my credit card as compromised information. I signed up for a credit card and not a debit card, even though this is uncommon for Romanians, because if it gets compromised and I treat it as compromised, the bank will have to chase whoever stole the money for the money, not me. If it's a debit card, I have to recover my money. If it's a credit card, I don't care. The bank has to recover the money. So 2001, if you Google poliție.exe, it's not a virus, it's the police database from 2001 with all the residents of Bucharest over 14. Name, last name, address, social security number. 2014, the financial authority from Romania leaked the ID cards of about 20,000 or 30,000 citizens. 2016, Adult Friend Finder got hacked. Thousands of divorces, unfortunately, 2 suicides. What can you do? KSF. 2018, I dare you, I double dare you, my friends, to go to the public administration, and when you're in line and you stood in line for like half an hour, when she asks you for the details, to ask, I would like to know how you're going to manage that data. If you do that, I have the utmost admiration for you, but okay. So by design, and this is the last slide, by design privacy is an utopia into the society. And this is a fact. I dare anybody to argue with that. So with that, I ask you, when we complain about Big Brother stealing our data versus Facebook stealing our data versus Google stealing our data, an ironic thing is that Big Brother takes 16% of your money, whereas the commercial companies take the rest, 85% of your money. Well, let's say 80% because 5% maybe you save, but eventually you're going to spend that as well. So, do we believe that Big Brother does that for our good, for our own good? Is it enough for us to stop complaining that Big Brother has all the metadata about everybody in the world? Do we accept the commercial sector? We do accept it. But should we think more about that? And last but by no means least, I have a thing against media hypes, because the media is the thing that influences people's opinion the most. Whatever the media says is whatever most people believe. This is a great power to wield. And the question is, should we stop challenging the media? The answer is obviously yes, but do we do that? Because my feeling is obviously that we don't. I thank you. I would like to make an announcement that our red team is hiring. If you want to hack Bitdefender staff and Bitdefender infrastructure from the Bitdefender offices with our tools, you can apply to that address. And I would like to thank you for your time, and we have time for questions or something. Thank you. So.
So, yeah, first guy.
Please.
Could you perhaps share a little bit about your personal setup, like which operating system, which maybe Linux distribution? About password manager you said already, but perhaps you have some specific recommendations that could improve privacy, at least for those persons who are willing to commit time and resources to really take care of this.
An excellent question. I don't improve my privacy. Is that a shock to anybody? I use full Apple ecosystem simply because the way I pick my vendors and the way I pick the vendors that process my data, if they have a bug bounty program or if I trust their security, this is how I pick my vendors, right? I pick the vendor of the software or of the tool that I can safely say that has a better security posture, not better security, but better security posture than others. So I'm a full-fledged Apple ecosystem person. When it comes to privacy, I trust Apple with my shit data, like my corporate information. And if it's something truly, truly critical, then I set up either PGP encrypted email or face-to-face conversations. Mostly, that's how I do very, very confidential stuff. Face-to-face meetings into some secluded place, and we talk there. Anything else, I don't trust. I don't even trust Signal for that, sorry. I know Signal is great, probably the most reliable in terms of privacy, but when it comes to really, really sensitive stuff, I don't trust even that, so face-to-face.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hi. Do you think that all leaks that happen to public entities are done accidentally or done by hackers, or some of them are false flags just to hide something else?
Well, that's an interesting question. Well, there's a great chance that the Snowden revelation was a false flag. I personally believed that for a long time, and part of me still believes that the Snowden leaks happened, and I'm going into the realms of conspiracy theory here, to shift our focus from that to something else. I believe that the NSA leak that happened a few years after that led to Eternal Blue and all of the other exploits, the NSA exploits that were shared on the internet. I believe that was a false flag as well. Essentially, I believe that anything that's leaked from the NSA is a false flag, so full stop. I believe that the NSA does stuff that we cannot even imagine. And if there's one thing that I've learned, especially through managing the bug bounty program, is that I can be surprised almost on a daily basis by the creativity of other people. So, yeah, I do believe that many of those leaks were false flags intended to divert public opinion.
You mentioned that you like passwordless stuff.
Yes.
So there goes what you know. And you don't trust biometrics, so there goes what you are. In an ideal environment, how would you authenticate?
You authenticate the device. So the passwordless initiative, when it initially started, who here is familiar with startssl.com? A few. So the way startssl.com authenticates you is that they issue a certificate to your device. You install that certificate, and that's used to authenticate, right? And it's something that you have, sort of, right? It's tokens, keys, certificates, and that's what you use to authenticate the device, the thing that accesses the service. That's my personal favorite way to doing things. Any other questions? Oh, please.
So a lot of people put stickers on their laptops' cameras, but should we put stickers on our phone front cameras?
This is a tricky thing. So let me tell you why you should put stickers on your cameras. Not because Big Brother watches you do stuff to yourself, but because actually there are cybercrime organizations that do that. So there's actually cybercrime organizations that will hijack your camera, film you watching porn. I know none of you do that, but for those of you or your friends that do, advise them that the blackmail is real. So there's a strand of malware that gets the camera feed, and if they manage to get a nude photo of you, then it gets all your friends and stuff, and they blackmail you into giving them probably around $2,000. Otherwise, they're going to share your nude photos to your friends. So this is actually really happening, more real probably than the NSA watching that. So that's one thing. The other thing, you put stickers on your camera, but you don't put it on your microphones. So, and the ambiental audio is probably more dangerous than the cameras. And should we put it on phones? Probably, but you have to think like the scenario in which that data would get compromised and who would benefit from that and how. The current scenario that's actually happening is the one with computers getting infected and the front-facing camera shooting nude photos if they catch nudity and then blackmailing you. I don't see them doing that with your mobile phone so easy, because they have to be ongoing, running, have nudity detection filters and so on and so forth, and your phone will not necessarily be able to process that. So that's mostly for targeted attacks. If you're a person that's targeted, then you should deny camera access to absolutely everything except the applications that you trust.
Hey. Hi, Jay.
Hey.
First of all, really nice presentation.
Thank you.
So, yeah, what I learned from this is that, like, everything's out to get you, nothing is secure. And we know that security is only, like, your data is only as secure as the weakest link, right?
Yep.
So for those times when you, like, when you're not sure, like your notary story, right? Like, what are you going to do with my data? I don't know. Like, how do you approach those things, right? How do you...
You treat
like,
it as compromised.
You treat it as...
Yes.
Yeah, as compromised.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, if any of you are CISOs or the likes or want to tackle security in your organization, you should definitely have scenarios where you treat data as compromised. And even though somebody may say, but this will never get compromised, you should have the scenarios and tabletop scenarios in which you run simulations, what would happen if it does get compromised. And if it sounds too scary and you're going to run away from it, come back and do it, because if it's too scary, then you should definitely do it. I've seen this so many times, people discussing about what if, our customer database gets leaked or gets compromised. What do we do? Oh, we don't want to talk about that. No. You know the little vulture from Bugs Bunny? No. You should definitely do that. You should make the effort and do that and treat it as compromised. Always treat everything as compromised.
Okay, and like, so my other question is, you treat it as compromised, but you should maybe have like a plan what happens, or like what should you do in case the data actually gets compromised? Or
well,
like, what is something you can do? Like, treat it as compromised is like, okay, check, it's compromised, but like,
it
is there
shifts
something
your,
I can...
Okay, so it does shift your mindset a little bit, because when you believe that your social security number is not compromised, then you're going to be standing in line and holding my line at enough, right? Because you're going to be like, so what are you doing with my social security number? If you treat it as compromised, you're going to be more relaxed. You're going to be, yeah, okay, have it, fuck it.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're out of time.
Yeah, we're up. But thank you so much, Jay, for the amazing presentation.
Thank you.